This story takes Thanksgiving to a whole other level. It happened a few years ago when I was dating this guy named Mike. We were in a pretty serious relationship to the point where I even moved into his house. He was an alright guy, except he had this unusually weird thing about him. He owned a pet turkey which he kept in his basement. I found it odd as hell, but just went with it. I didn't think it was a big deal seeing as the turkey was harmless and kept away from us and the rest of the house downstairs. Plus, Mike solely took care of the turkey and didn't expect me to help him at all, which I was completely okay with. The day after I officially moved in, I always avoided it. It wasn't like it was a dog or a cat, but Mike would treat it as such. He would keep it in this sizable fenced-in area where the floor was covered in dirt and straw like a barn. There were even troughs for food and water, as well as a dog bed for it, but obviously there was no dog down there. However, things got worse the longer I stayed at the house. All I wanted for him was to get rid of it. The basement slowly turned into a sty. The angrier I got at how dirty it was, the more he would neglect cleaning it. Over time, we would have nasty arguments over it daily. The constant fights over the turkey put so much strain on our relationship that we stopped sleeping together. I stayed in the bedroom upstairs, while he stayed downstairs, setting up a cot on the other side of the basement, next to his turkey. Over the years, and yes, I mean years that this was all going down, my boyfriend slowly lost his mind. He spent most of his time down in the basement. He was treating that animal like a princess, while I was left feeling like he didn't care about me anymore. Obviously, the whole situation was comical to everyone, but terrible for me. At some point, the thought occurred to me that that turkey could all be a distraction from some other woman. It literally felt better to suspect him of cheating on me with a crack whore than to admit the truth. Then, before I knew it, it was Thanksgiving night. I made sure to tell all my friends and family to avoid our house like the plague. But to my surprise, Thanksgiving Day passed without incident. Mike and I had dinner, then we went to our respective sleeping destinations. As Mike made his way downstairs, I went upstairs, washed up, then curled into bed. About an hour or two into my sleep, I remember being awoken by loud, strange noises coming from downstairs. It sounded like my boyfriend was with another woman. He was shouting and grunting, and there was this crazy high-pitched wailing echoing through the house. Furious, I went to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, then I went to the basement door. I pressed my ear against the door and tried to listen closely. I couldn't really make out who or what exactly was happening down there, but it sounded freakish, like Mike was cheating on me on Thanksgiving. Left with no other choice, I opened the door and started making my way downstairs.
What the hell are you doing?
If I thought my world turned upside down when I first saw my boyfriend's turkey, my universe completely shattered when I saw what was happening to it. My boyfriend was screwing the goddamn turkey. He had the helpless thing strung up so it couldn't escape as he had his way with it. I'd never seen anything so brutal, so sick. He sounded like he was having the time of his life, so sucked into ravaging the turkey that he had no clue I was even there. I could only stand there and watch for a matter of seconds before I was overcome with rage.
You monster!
Please!
Once it was all over, my boyfriend was writhing in a pool of his own blood. The turkey had been abused within an inch of its life and wasn't moving. After hating it for so long, I felt terrible for it at that moment. I can't imagine how much it must have suffered. I called the police right after, not expecting either of them to survive. But in a cruel twist of fate, my ex-boyfriend recovered from his injuries and went to jail for animal cruelty, while the turkey succumbed to the psychological trauma and eventually starved itself to death. I eventually turned myself into the police, so I'm serving multiple years in prison. I know what I did was justified, and there's an argument to be made that I should have gotten off scot-free, but at least my sentence was heavily reduced. However, as much as prison sucks, nothing compares to the weight of this memory in my head. I'll never unsee that sight. No matter what happens for the rest of my life, this will go down as the most horrifying Thanksgiving ever. This Thanksgiving story was inspired by a viral image that surfaced on the internet in the early 2000s. It showcases the mugshots of two distraught individuals who appear to be a couple. In the image, it appears to be a news outlet that headlines the male had intercourse with a turkey on Thanksgiving, and that his girlfriend stabbed him 5 times after finding out. Whether the case is factual or not, we wanted to feature this in today's video and give you guys some extra stuffing for your Thanksgiving stories this year.
It was the night of Thanksgiving. I've been married, had kids, gotten divorced, retired, and watched all my children grow up and leave home. I didn't want to spend my final years alone, nor did I want to remarry, so I decided to get a roommate. That's when I got back into contact with an old friend, a guy named Frank. In all honesty, Frank and I used to be good friends, but that was probably 30 years before we started living under the same roof. Back in the day, we could complain to each other about work, women, and children, but none of that stuff was a factor in either of our lives anymore. As it turned out, we were both bitter assholes who were impossible to live with. Every single day, there was a new pointless argument over some stupid little shit. We could never compromise or work together on anything. We cooked our food and cleaned up our own messes. I had my side of the fridge and he had his. Our bathrooms were separate. Hell, we even had designated seats in the living room. For Thanksgiving this year, neither of our families wanted us around, which left us stuck together. Food was always our biggest point of contention, so there was an unspoken agreement between Frank and I that I would make and eat my own Thanksgiving dinner and he would worry about his own. By the time I was finished, I was exhausted from both the cooking and the heavy eating. The rest of the turkey needed to come to room temperature before I put it in the fridge anyway, so I left it on the counter and went to my room for a nap. But not before giving Frank an explicit warning. Hey, Frank, I'm laying down for a bit. Don't eat my turkey! Sometime later, I woke up much later than I expected. It was night out, which meant I must have slept for at least 3 hours. I turned on my bedside lamp and tried to get a bearing on things. I hadn't planned on sleeping for so long, so I was a bit disoriented. As I came to, I heard some noises outside my door. It didn't sound like one of Frank's TV shows, as it's usually some war documentary playing at maximum volume while he sleeps on the recliner. This was different, quieter. Too quiet for Frank to be listening to it, but loud enough for him to be making the sound. With a significant degree of suspicion, I crept up to my door and opened it. The sounds coming down the hallway were clearer now. It was coming from the kitchen, yet there were no lights on anywhere except my room, so there was no way he could have been cooking. Quietly, I shuffled my way down the hall. I knew Frank wouldn't hear me coming, so I knew whatever he was doing, I was about to catch him red-handed. Once I reached the end of the hall, I poked my head around the corner, and sure enough, there he was. My turkey was still sitting on the kitchen counter, and Frank was hunched over it, pulling it apart with his bare hands and eating it like a wild animal. I don't know what came over me in that moment, but I couldn't contain my anger with him anymore. Frank! Frank! Cut that out! I said hands off my turkey, damn it! Oh, shit! Frank! 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 I never meant to make him fall over. I knew he was too old to handle a fall. I was just so angry. All I wanted to do was get him away from my turkey, but I pushed too hard. Way too hard. Reality set in very quickly. and in a last-ditch effort to save Frank's life, I called 911. They took him to the hospital, but there was nothing they could do. His neck was broken in the fall. Knowing he died by my hands, I didn't argue with the police when they arrested me. It's funny to think I became roommates with Frank because I didn't want to die alone, but all I did was kill him. And now I'll be lucky to die with a cellmate.
An 80-year-old man was taken out in an alleged altercation over Thanksgiving dinner, and his longtime roommate and friend charged in his death claims it was merely an accident. Richard Lombardi, 65, entered the courtroom on Friday after being charged with involuntary manslaughter and assault and battery on a person over 60. Lombardi's roommate, Frank Griswold, was pronounced dead at the hospital on Wednesday night after police say he was pushed to the ground by Lombardi, hitting his head and breaking his neck and nose in the fall. According to court documents, Lombardi said he asked Griswold not to go near the turkey he had made for Thanksgiving dinner. When Griswold went into the kitchen to wash dishes near the turkey, Lombardi grabbed him and pushed him to the side, causing his feet to be tangled underneath him, sending him to the ground. The two men were friends and had been living together since 2001. Lombardi is currently being held without bail.
I've been dating this girl named Candy for a couple of months. We eventually wanted to move in together after some time, suggesting that I move in with her and her parents. That way we could save up and get a place of our own. I was of course nervous as hell considering I never met her parents before. Candy suggested I meet them for Thanksgiving and to pitch the idea to them, so I agreed. On the night of Thanksgiving, I came over to her house. When I finally met her parents, I started having second thoughts. Her mom was nice, but her dad was a whole other story. He was this angry old pastor that didn't look right in the head. Whenever he looked at me, he gave me this dirty look like I was a piece of shit that didn't belong in the household. The mere idea of me being with his daughter in any capacity, let alone moving in with her before getting married, clearly went against every single one of his values.
So, Dad, Andrew decided to move into my room.
What the hell did you just say? Over my dead body!
Well, then maybe you should die!
I just sat there as they argued the entire night. By the end of the night, it had been decided. I was moving in. I felt nervous about the whole thing, but Candy said it would be fine. Despite her reassurance, things didn't go great. Her dad didn't want me there. He gave me dirty looks whenever we crossed paths, and he was always talking about how Candy and I should break up. I spent as much time as I could at work, and whenever I got home, I would lock myself in our bedroom. I was always too scared to be out in the living room alone. It wasn't just me he was having problems with either. He was always arguing with his wife and daughter, usually about me. I honestly couldn't understand how he was ever a pastor, because the man had severe anger management problems, but many nights, we could hear him breaking things downstairs, and on several occasions, he even tried to break through our door, knowing how violent he could get. I begged Candy to just move out with me, even if we had to sleep on the floor for a few months, but she was adamant. She and her mother were dead set on proving to her father that he couldn't control them anymore. They would rather play the game of cat and mouse to avoid him than leave. We did it for an entire year, and honestly, it was hell. Finally, Thanksgiving rolled around once again, the anniversary of when everything went wrong. Candy's dad was supposed to be working late at the church for a special Thanksgiving charity event, which meant that at least for one night, we could have a little peace and quiet. We cooked a decent Thanksgiving feast, with plenty of leftovers planned of course, then set the table for 3. As the man of the house for the evening, I carved the turkey, then we finally sat down to eat. At last, it seemed like we could breathe. But then all of a sudden, Candy's father returned home early. He walked into the dining room and looked at us, then walked away into his room. We didn't know what to expect, if he would just stay in there or demand to be seated, so we just waited. A moment later, He came back out, then stood in the entrance to the dining room. He hadn't changed clothes or said anything, and he wasn't making any impression like he wanted to sit down. He just stood there, staring at us, until we all started to eat again. The situation was bizarre and awkward as hell. We weren't tasting the food anymore, only swallowing it so the silence was a little more bearable, so we wouldn't have to make eye contact with him. Without warning, he turned off the lights. We all just sat there in a deafening silence. Across the table, I could vaguely see Candy becoming more upset with every passing second. She was fed up, ready to lash out once and for all, but I knew something was wrong.
What the hell is your fucking problem?
Happy Thanksgiving.
Hello? I would like to report a shooting.
A Virginia youth pastor is jailed and being charged in the Thanksgiving night deaths of his wife, stepdaughter, and the stepdaughter's boyfriend. Christopher Gaddis, 58, was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of using a firearm. Allegedly, an argument erupted, though the exact details remain unclear. It's known that the conflict centered on long-standing tensions between Christopher and his stepdaughter, Candy, as well as her boyfriend, Andrew. As the argument escalated, Gaddis retrieved a firearm. He then took out his wife, Janet, and stepdaughter inside the home. Andrew tried to escape but was taken out just outside in the front yard. Neighbors heard the ordeal, but Chris called the authorities, not 911, but his alarm company. When police arrived, they found Chris Gaddis calmly waiting on the porch. He was arrested on the spot. There had been friction between Chris and Candy. Gaddis reportedly disapproved of the couple staying in his home. These tensions came to a boiling point that Thanksgiving night, resulting in unimaginable violence.